Alright everybody, welcome to the channel and welcome to a one of a 6-part series for Wartales, where I'm kind of going to just really go over and talk about all of the classes, kind of ways how to play them, or how I play them at least, best ways to use them both inside of the fighting map and then on the world map, and their professions, and just a few little things here and there to try to help direct how you want to be using each of the different classes in the best way that works for me. Whenever I play on the hardest difficulty, and this is usually what I do as just a staple to make it so it works as best as I can. Now obviously there'll be other ways that you can go about these classes, how you can use them, how you build them, what stats you go on, so on and so forth. Obviously it's up to you how you want to use them, but if you're looking for a way that for sure works and you can kind of build your own build around, this is going to be one of the 6 videos that'll help you. So with that being said, we can just go ahead and get into the first one. The next class we can look at here is going to be your Brute. Now your Brute is probably going to be a combination of a couple different things. Now depending on how you build him, he might be your highest damage dealer. Either him or your Ranger will probably be outputting the most damage. However, you can also build your Brute to also be able to be one of the better tanks. So it's kind of up to you how you want to build him. If you feel like you want to have a secondary kind of pseudo tank, you have him with the shield, or if you just want to go full damage, you have him have the two-handed hammer. That's ultimately up to you. I don't think one is right over the other one. Since I play on harder difficulties, I like having more frontline, so I like to go with the club and the shield. For utility, first aid is pretty bad overall. Like I said, this guy is going to be, I feel like, doing a lot of damage, so you don't want to use that healing skill to, take up some of your points and actions and stuff like that. You could get taunt. Taunt isn't too bad. However, we'll see later that there is an ability that I like to get on the Brute here that kind of does the weakening thing, so I don't go that route for that reason. And then finally, you can go Wrath. Or Wrath, excuse me. This one is really, really good. Again, I play mine as kind of a pseudo tank as well as doing damage. So having Wrath is just a really, really good skill to have here and just helps out a lot. So again, you can play how you want to. My recommendation is to get Wrath. And then of course, your traits, you can go Strong. This is one of the ones where I like to get hardworking. We'll see here pretty soon why that is, but having more profession experience is going to be really, really beneficial for what we're going to uncover here pretty soon in this video. Alright, now we're here to check out our Brute, our people that use the maces or the hammers, whatever you prefer to call it. And we have, right off the bat, we have the traits at level 2. So the first one that we have are Relentless Charge. Disengages and charges in a straight line, deals some damage, and applies slowdown, which reduces their movement speed by half. And you get to move 6 meters with this. Now, this one's not too terribly bad. With a Brute, I normally have them kind of as my secondary tank and kind of more up on the front line. So there's not normally a reason for me to disengage and need to go fight. It obviously can work. It's not like it's a bad thing by any means. You definitely can use this as it's a pretty good skill overall. Again, it's just not one that like I'm prioritizing. So I don't have anything bad about this one. It's a good skill. It's just not what I want to use for mine specifically in the Vanguard build here. Now with the Smasher, you deal damage to enemy and apply 2 poison to any bleeding units. Now, a lot of maces that you get, or hammers, war hammers, whatever, if the enemy has armor, you can hit them, and while they still have armor, it'll cause bleeding. Then you can do this, and you can apply poison. And 2 poisons and 1 bleed, they'll lose 30% of their HP every turn. So, it does quite a bit of damage. Now, my other Brute that I have has this one right now. And he's got the weapon that makes it so they get bleeding if they have armor. So, it works out pretty well. This is definitely another good one. There's, not much to say about that. It's just The reason that I am going the Destroyer is, one, I can equip heavy armor while these other two are medium armor, and then I get weakening. So as I talked about at the beginning about not wanting to put weakening on this guy, it's because of this ability right here. Now the reason why I have this is because the weapon that I have is currently one where I have to line up an attack, and then the next turn I get to attack with it. So I use weakening to force the enemy to engage and hold him there for the turn, and then I can use a weakening blow the following turn. Or I use weakening blow to cause them to hold there, and then I use my power attack, my main attack, whatever you prefer to call it, the following turn. Now you go look at the first set of passives, and you have defensive stance. Now, you get deflection, and if you're engaged in combat, you get 1 valor point, and deflection makes it so damage is reduced by 70%. So, I mean, it's a decent skill, right? Like, it's not great, it's not bad. If you're using a one-handed and a shield, this one's not too bad. It's a little bit better to use because if you're using a shield, it means you're probably tanking a little bit more. So then it's good to have. But the Brute is... My Ranger is my main damage dealer, and then for me, I use my Brute as my second. So, going a defensive build isn't really what I'm looking for. Now, you have Valorous Chain. Every time this attack hits several enemies, you gain 1 Valor point. Now, this is only good, really, if you are using a two-handed weapon. If you're using a one-handed, majority of your attacks aren't going to hit multiple people. For this one, Weakening Blow only hits 1 enemy, but Poison Impact hits 2. So if you have Weakening Blow and you go Valorous Chain, it doesn't pair well. If you're going to go Valorous Chain, you probably need Poison Impact, and then it'll pair together, because the 1 Valor that you use on this one, you'll get it back. Now I'm using a two-handed weapon that powers up and that stuff, so that does pair well with Valorous Chain, but it's not what I want. What I would like to have is Valorous Duel. So anytime I engage in combat, I gain 1 Valor point. So I use 1 to force my enemy to be locked into place. I get 1 back, and then next turn I attack with my power attack, and it does a bunch of damage. So that's kind of my little niche thing right there. That's how I play with George here. And if you've watched the videos, anything that I comment about this, like what I do and how it works and stuff like that, it works here like that. So, you know, it's just good. It's how I want it to be. Then you have Armor Breaker, which damage inflicted to armor is increased by 35%, which is good because, I mean, once you get to the point where you're at where I'm at, and I'm assuming obviously later game, people start to have really, really high armor values. So being able to take that armor out right away also lowers their guard, so they can't... Your attacks will do more damage if they don't have armor. So taking out the armor sooner rather than later is just beneficial overall. Your next talent is Opportunism. So as long as there are at least 2 enemies within 6 meters of this unit has protection, which means that damage taken is reduced by 30%. Now, that's not bad because your Brute's normally going to be on the front line, especially if you're going a build like mine where you're trying to hit multiple people at a time with this weapon, or you're going any two-handed one. This is really good because he's going to be taking a lot of hits. This is going to make it so he doesn't take as much damage. So, I mean, it's just a good skill overall. Like, it's not better than Armor Breaker, but it's not, like, necessarily worse. So, it's just ultimately kind of what you want with it. And then finally, you have Cruelty. So, damage and critical hit increased by 20% against units with at least 1 debuff. Again, this is also another really good one because you can apply Weakening, you can apply Poison, you can apply Slowdown. So, I mean, just here, like, this character is automatically going to apply some sort of debuff on the enemy, and then you just get to do more damage with this. So, it's really what you're looking for. Do you want to do more damage to armor? Do you want to be tankier? Or do you want to do more, like, just damage overall? Now, obviously, this is 35% damage, but it's only armor. This is 20% damage overall. So, it's, you know, it's... Pick your poison in a good way. Like, it's just whatever you feel is the best fit for your build will work. If you don't know which one is best, Armor Breaker probably is the way to go, just because it's always going to be able to be utilized. Opportunism technically will always be utilized, but this character might not be getting attacked. And Cruelty, it just, you might not have a debuff on a certain character. So Armor Breaker is like the staple, like best one to go if you just are unsure. Then you have Guard Breaker. Attacks dealt ignore 50% of the enemy's guard, which, again, it's level 8, so you're not going to be using it until late game. Early game, this isn't going to seem like that much, because somebody's got like 3% or 7% guard. Like, I'm only ignoring 3% of it. That's only a couple points of damage. You're right, it's not much. But when you start getting later and enemies have 30, they do damage reduction to 30 to 50% of your total damage, this will start to kick in a lot and start to help out quite a bit. So this definitely is a really good skill here to look at and possibly get when you get here. Then you have Temperance. After taking 2 attacks, this unit gains Deflection. So Deflection is damage taken of your next attack is reduced by 70%. So if you're building kind of tanky, this is definitely a good one to go, because it's just going to mean that basically the third hit isn't really going to do much damage to you. So it's just nice to have. Again, it's a little bit of another one of the gamble ones, because you have to tank a couple hits before it starts to kick in. So if you're building your Brute as... I say the Brute can be a pseudo tank, as in a secondary tank. If you decide to build him as a main tank, then your Temperance right here is not bad to have. But you definitely only go this, I think, if you have a shield and you're wearing heavy armor. And then finally, you have one-on-one. This unit has Rivalry as long as there's no other unit next to them or their opponent. So basically, damage taken dealt by the engaged opponent reduced by 50%. So if you get this guy up and you go put him against somebody and nobody else is around, whenever he hits you, you're going to take 50% less damage, which is really good. Again, 50% that's half the damage. That's a huge amount. However, when you start to get to late game, when you're level 8, you're going to have a few people in the party. If this was an early skill, this would be pretty good. But, you're going to have a full team. You're going to have probably a dozen people on your team. You're probably going to be going up against well over a dozen enemies, maybe 15 to 17 even enemies. So enemies are going to be near you or your opponent. So this is a good skill, but it's too situational. So because of that, when I get one more level on George here and get level 8, I'm gonna go Guard Breaker. But if you're in the right positions, you can make both of these work also. And then finally, you have the level 10, which second weapon. You can equip the second mace and swap weapon in combat. I might get this one just because the weapon that I currently have is a charge up one, and I might want to have a mace where it's just I can attack the turn that I want to instead of waiting until the next turn to get the attack off. Now this weapon does crazy damage, but I have to wait that turn to charge it up. So it's got its drawbacks. But this one's not too bad. Then you have Defensive Riposte, which when this unit disengages, they have a 50% chance to deal an attack of opportunity instead of taking one. Now, I don't know if this pairs with Relentless Charge, where you can charge through, do the damage, and then also do an attack of opportunity. I'm not too sure. It's something that you would have to mess with. I don't have the Vanguard tree, so I'm not gonna go for this right now. And I don't really like, disengaging. I would much rather just, kill the unit. If I have somebody that's up on the front line, it's because I want them to be fighting. I don't want to disengage them. My Brute, my Swordsman, I don't want them to have disengagements because I want them to be fighting. Like, that's what I have them for. That's how I'm building them. So this can work if your build is going for that, but how I think the Brute should be is I kind of would stay away from this one. And then finally, you have Intervention. This unit can swap places with the adjacent ally engaged in combat. The unit becomes engaged in combat and will deal an attack of opportunity. So basically, if your archer gets caught out, you can switch places with the archer, and you become engaged with that enemy, and you get to attack once. So it's not too bad. It's a pretty decent skill. If you feel like there's, if you have a really, really big roster, and you're fighting a huge swarm of enemies, then it becomes a little bit of a situation where, probably going to have somebody get caught out, and you need to, swap places with somebody, protect an archer, protect a ranger, somebody that, doesn't need to be up on the front line. You can swap places with them and take over for them. So this is a pretty decent one. It does cost a Valor point, which sucks a little bit, but, I mean, to protect the unit, 1 Valor point isn't that big of a deal. So Intervention is probably like 25% of the time, and the second weapon is probably 75%. I feel like the level 10 talent tree for the Brute is kind of lackluster in comparison to other ones. Um, it's just a lot of like disengage and re-engage stuff, which isn't all that great. But to each their own. Some people might find a lot of utilization out of it, but for me, when I make my characters and that stuff, I decide how I want them to be, and then I go with that. This guy is meant about doing a bunch of damage and staying engaged with an enemy, not disengaging and running somewhere else instead, right? So that's kind of how I have mine set up. Again, obviously you can do your own. I've got 2 brutes, and so their builds are going to be a little bit different. I've got one going a little bit of a poison build here and that stuff, but down here, these later levels, it's probably going to be pretty similar. And then we get to the point of our profession and what we want for it. So I right now have the blacksmith because it's full strength, and that's what my brute is doing a lot of damage, so I want him to have a lot of strength in order to do that. Now, going a miner would be okay, because I'm pretty sure miner also gets some strength. Going a cook or a bard to get some constitution would be fine. A tinker, not that bad. You could get some willpower. I mean, they're all okay, but I feel like the best one is probably to go blacksmith or miner, and then eventually, level it up so that way you get some strength as well, because you want him to be able to do more damage. While he is your pseudo tank, he's also like your pseudo carry. He's a jack of all trades. He's going to be hitting as one of the hardest, if not the hardest person, and he is going to be one of the tankiest, if not the tankiest person on your team simultaneously. He's going to be doing both at the same time. So there's a lot to work with this unit. There's a lot that you can do with this unit, which in return gives you kind of a lot of versatility on which profession might be the best. So the Brute is really a fit your playstyle kind of unit, in the sense of whatever you need, you can look at the Brute and probably be able to pick that up from here. But picking up the blacksmith and then going the destroyer build is just how I play my Brute in Wartales.